So just to do a little bit of setup here, as many of you on this call know, we launched a new effort this past week when Vladimir Putin went into Ukraine to own the narrative online and fight back against Russian disinformation. This is really important work. This is activism. This isn't playing around on your computer or just hopping on social media for fun. This is important in and the strategies that Putin's been using for years and that the GOP's been using and that we've been so far behind in is this kind of coordinated activism around driving a message. And so, it really is up to all of us to help make sure that Putin's lies don't permeate as deeply as they otherwise would, and that the truth gets out there. And we can't keep relying on people in power to make sure that happens on our behalf. We have to step up and be a part of the solution. So thank you all for doing that. And so we are super excited today to have Olga on to help us understand what's happening right now in the disinformation space. What's happening in Russia, and I can't wait to dig in on the conversation here. So yeah, as people keep filing in, definitely drop your name and in chat and where you're from, so that we know sort of where everybody's from. And again, just one more time, use that Q&A area to ask questions. So without further ado, Jamie, did you want to introduce Olga?
I don't think Olga needs an introduction, does she? If
Maybe
you're
not.
on Twitter and you have ever used the word Russia or Putin, you probably know Olga. So she is pretty much this is something that she has been researching for years. And I know I was sending her pictures of the Ukrainian rally here in Saturday. We had 1,000 people show up in 24 hours. So I don't think, if you're not following Olga on Twitter, you need to be. So
I wonder how many times I used Putin in Russia over the past 7 years. Someone needs to calculate that.
Probably a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you everyone and welcome. I am so happy you are hosting this because the disinformation space is so important, and the division we're seeing in our country is basically due to the Russian disinformation operations that have been going on forever. And this stems back to even the Soviet days. Like the KGB, their number one tactic in the West was disinformation operations. But at the time, they were happy if they could get a KGB agent to place, disinformation piece in a local paper where 10 people read it. With social media, they weaponized it, and we clearly see the damage. I mean, we've had so many deaths from COVID because of disinformation. We had the trucker rallies, the Trump. I mean, everything that we've had, all the divisions in this country, it comes from disinformation. And that's part of Russia's hybrid warfare toolkit that they have. It's disinformation, division campaigns, cyber attacks, political captures, what we had in the White House the past few years, and economic capture and so forth. And all these were used in Ukraine. And it was, when that's actually how I became alarmed in 2015, because I started seeing Russian media running these disinformation operations against US and Russian social media. And I was like, oh my God, this is what they did in Ukraine. And I mean, everything was tested on Ukraine and Estonia for that matter, and all the neighbors. So, I mean, it's very, very important to be able to fight disinformation, not to spread disinformation, to be able to verify and to actually, go back to developing critical thinking, because we see what's happening. I mean, we have family members we've lost, we've had neighbors we don't speak to, and this country got so polarized because of this. And because Russia targeted, and that's what Russia does. I mean, again, going back to KGB days, they search for vulnerabilities in anywhere, and then they amplify it, and they will search for like-minded people, and then continue amplifying it to the point that it goes from online to offline, where they'll see, like during Ferguson, they saw, the protest being a vital issue, and they amplified it, and then they started putting together protests that were, pro Black Lives Matter, pro all lives matter in the same place in order to cause a clash. So, I mean, the disinformation even goes further than online. It always manifests into outside. And we saw the same thing with the Capitol attacks and pretty much all the violence that we're seeing globally.
So that's really good context. And I know, I mean, we've been Twitter buddies since 2017.
Yeah.
and I know that you've been you follow this stuff like nobody else practically. So what is what's happening now? Like what narratives do you see emerging out of the sort of the Kremlin side, or their allies in the West?
So I wrote several articles on what they were pushing, priming this to the point of their war against Ukraine, further invasion, because they invaded Ukraine in 2014, but this all-out war on Ukraine. And it began targeting US, and we saw it go from online into actual media outlets by experts. And there were articles that started, and it would, again, go online, and they had several points. It was fear-mongering about nuclear weapons, and is Ukraine worth getting into a nuclear war? It was, why is even Ukraine worth it? What do we care what happens in Ukraine, which we still see. J.D. Vance recently made that stunning video and had to issue a correction when he realized he has a huge Ukrainian community in his district. And he was like, oh, okay, let me issue an apology. And then it went to NATO. And then, like NATO expansionism, which is a complete lie. NATO has stayed the same for quite a while. Putin was not bothered about NATO. He used that as a pretext in order to launch this attack. And I mean, and you saw it very clearly when he came in with his first set of demands, besides Ukraine not joining NATO. He came in with the first set of demands to roll back to 1997. I mean, really, like, who's going to go and change all of European security just because he decided to wake up one day and say, I want to invade Ukraine, and I'm going to use that as a pretext. And so it's continued. And then they started with the genocide and the Nazi. There's a lot of disinformation online, that Ukraine commits genocide. I mean, he called the Ukrainian president, said he wanted to commit a massacre against Russians, and he's committing genocide. Zelensky's Jewish. I mean, the whole thing is surreal. But again, it falls into that part of the disinformation sphere where people don't verify. They just hear, oh, genocide, Ukraine, Nazis. And this is what they want to do. It's the same thing they did with Hillary Clinton. They worked on the emails part for years. It started like around 2010, that disinformation. So all her accomplishments, if you ask anyone on any point of this world, Hillary Clinton, what do you think? Emails. That's all that will stick into your head. And this is what they've been doing with Ukraine by putting that they're Nazis, that, and that they're murdering people, which is a complete lie. So we have to worry about that. And we also, on the far left, the far left, the green walls of the sphere, they are pushing that it's the CIA and the US are the ones who are pushing Ukraine into this war through, to fight with Russia. That's so far from the truth, because Russia has had this strategy. This is a military strategy. They didn't wake up and say, oh, gee, Biden's president now, or Trump's not president, so I'm going to walk into Ukraine. That's not how it works. They have a military strategy just like we do. First, it was to annex Belarus, which they completed in December. And then it was to move on to Ukraine. Then part of their military strategy is Moldova, and then the Suwalki corridor, and potentially Lithuania. So these are like a decade-long military strategy. They started with Belarus first because they needed to have that expanded territory and plus the use for weapons and their military. And from there, they naturally went into Ukraine. And then from there, Moldova right now is at risk. So, I mean, there's a lot of disinformation circulating around. Also, there's a lot of fake videos circulating around, and they want us to make a mistake. And I actually, because I haven't slept for a week with this, everything happening, I've made the mistake and I've taken it down. So they want like us, credible sources, to circulate fake videos that can then go be proven that that's like in 2014 or 15 or 18 or not Ukraine. And they're doing it on purpose. So, I mean, you have to be extremely careful where you get the video, where you get the information, triple check it, because right now, the disinformation field is insane. Every other thing I'm reading on social media is disinformation, even to the point that the general, Gerasimov, Putin's military general, got fired. And I saw credible people spreading it around yesterday. I'm like, whoa, he did not get fired. And then sure enough, he showed up at the, National Security Council meeting. So you have to be very careful with that.
It does seem like right now, for the moment anyway, that Ukrainians are getting a little bit of an advantage on social media with Zelensky's posts, with some of the ambassadors' posts. And so how do we keep up that momentum to make sure that content that's getting, spread around and amplified like it is?
We just have to continue supporting Ukrainians, documenting. The most important thing right now to beat disinformation is to post information and to document the war crimes. Because, for instance, there were videos going around today of a thermobaric bomb being hit, and now it's been verified that there was a vacuum bomb that Russia used this morning on Ukraine. It is very important right now, like the best we can do, because the International Criminal Court just said they are opening a investigation into potential war crimes in Ukraine, is to gather this information. And also to see, beat back any narratives that we see that's against Ukraine, because the situation is very clear. Ukraine is a sovereign country. They have for years been, they fought 2 revolutions to kick out 2 pro-Kremlin presidents. They, for years, have been moving towards the West. They want nothing to do with Russia. I mean, who would right now? Everyone's locked up in Russia. It's one big prison. So they want to move towards the West, towards Europe. And they, got attacked. That's it. I mean, for me, I can't even process it. I mean, for those who don't know, I'm both Russian and Ukrainian. I am still, despite predicting and writing this is where we were going to be for the past year, I still can't process what I'm seeing, because it's like one country just decided, you know what, I don't want this country, whatever, I'm going to assassinate their leadership and go in and throw bombs and kill innocent people and children and whatnot. So I mean, we just have to document the war crimes. We have to highlight all the Ukrainian donations, because right now what's happening on the Romanian and the Polish border, heartbreaking. My friend personally today, it took him 4 days to get his wife and children to the border to say goodbye to them. And I mean, it was like a 3.5 day bus ride. And then they got off a bus checkpoint and had to stand there for another, like almost 9 hours to finally cross the border. And then he let them, they went into Ukraine, into Poland, and he went back. So, I mean, right now there's just so much happening in there that we need to offer the support. We are going to see Russia, even though they're occupied with this, with midterms, they will come back and, try to run the biggest disinformation operation against us, coming towards closer. I haven't seen signs of it yet. Normally, I start seeing when it starts, and I'll definitely let everyone know and document it as I see it. Right now, it'll be interesting which route they go, because you even see the far right fracturing, because you have half of the far right who are Putin apologists now anti-Putin or pro-Ukraine. Then you still have the other ones who are still, like Michael Flynn today issued a pro-Putin statement. So, I mean, we'll have to see how it goes and see where how Russia will act going forward.
Can the High Court actually do anything?
Can what?
The High Court actually do anything? That was one of the questions we had. What can the High Court actually do investigating these human rights abuses?
I mean, it's good to document it for history. As they say, history will not look back kindly, although I keep saying we have to survive this in order to get to history, not looking back to, something. What can they do? They'll just document it for history. Other than that, I mean, I don't think they're going to go with a marshal and arrest Putin. You can't even get to Putin. He's hidden in a bunker in the Urals right now. So, we would all love to get Putin. Everybody right now would love to go, get him before he amplifies this even to another level and ramps it up. But it's always good to document it, and it's fair to the victims, because the victims were part of war crimes, like their families. They need to know, and they need to have it also properly documented.
Now, we do have a question on specific ideas on how to effectively counter disinformation. What's the best way to discover it and identify the disinformation? And are there specific hashtags that are effective for identifying disinformation?
It's hard because it's fluid. You'll just start seeing a certain talking point at the, being repeated and repeated. And then when you see it repeated too much, you're like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. So there are no hashtags. And the best way to identify is to verify. I mean, there's no other way, and verify from credible sources. It's not that someone posted and you post and whatever. Also, I mean, a lot of people, don't like to make mistakes on Twitter, or at least they don't like to admit they made a mistake. I personally, if I make a mistake, I delete the post, and I will say, this post is deleted because it was a mistake. A lot of people will retweet or quote tweet it to correct it, or add into it to correct it, but then the original post is still circulating. So the disinformation or the mistake is still carrying on, So I think doing things like that, like if you see you made a mistake or you posted something, just remove it, and just say, sorry, I'm removing it because it's an error. And that's that. It's much better to clean the information space, keep it clean, than to just have it circulating around. Because we learned how disinformation works. Tucker Carlson went on his show. No, was it Tucker or Hannity? One of them. Went on their show, Hannity, and said a dead person voted. That got so many retweets and so much attention on social media that, I mean, it was incredible. Then this poor woman who uses her husband's name, came out and said, hello, I'm alive. I did vote. I'm here. I'm alive. He had to issue a correction. The correction got probably 5% of the attention that his initial claim is. So anyone who heard him, and saw it on Twitter sphere or Instagram or wherever, they still were with the impression that some dead person voted. And, because the correction is not exciting. It's more exciting to hear, the dead person voted than saying, oh, I made a mistake and the woman's actually alive. She just happens to use her deceased husband's name. So that's why I always say it's better to remove it and to correct it. Say I'm removing it, like I made a mistake this morning. And I deleted it. I said I deleted my earlier tweet, and here's the correct information as of now.
I know one thing that we've learned in general disinformation is that we don't want to repeat it, even to refute it. So, repeat the truth over and over again. I dropped in chat Daniel Dale, who is a fact finder himself, has a Ukraine list on Twitter. That's a good list to follow with, people on the ground. So hopefully that is another piece. And then when we add things to our social toolkits, we are definitely, vetting that information back to the source. So anytime you can take it straight back to the source, independently Google it yourself, do a reverse lookup on an image, to see if it's really applying to what's happening on the ground today.
Yeah, and we actually had a question about verifying videos. On how do you do that when it's, you don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, and aren't computer experts, said, I don't know, can't tell how old a video is or if it's edited, or even which language they're speaking.
I speak both languages and I still don't know what the video is or if it's edited, because right now there's just so much disinformation. And during this, it's like this, like the media keeps saying, the fog of war. The fog of war is very real, because you also have to remember it's not it is intentional disinformation, but in war, both sides will put out, kind of disinformation just for morale building. You know what I mean? Because you're like, the Ukrainian military is going to want their Ukrainian forces to say, oh, wow, look, we're kicking Russia's butt and this and that, and we arrested 5,000 surrendered and this and that. The Russian military on their end is trying to build the morale of theirs. So I read both, and it's fascinating. I don't even bother tweeting it right now, but I read both, and it's like you read Russian news and it's like they've captured everyone and there's no one left in Ukraine. There are, the rest are committing terrorist attack, but half of them they captured. And then you read Ukrainian news and it's like, same thing. This is something every country does when you go into the field of war. You're not going to be like, we're losing, so just give up. You have to keep the morale up. With the videos, it's hard. It really is hard. There are OSINT people who are much, much better, and they've even made mistakes where they can geolocate it. They can, see what when it was uploaded online, like they could do a more thorough thing. And even a few of them I've seen, they've made the mistakes. Same thing, So right now, it's best, right? Unless it's funny, like today I saw just, a girl on TikTok, like giving a lesson on how to drive a tank, and it's just funny. Unless it's something like that, when it comes to like chemical weapons or the thermobaric weapons or, any of the other scenes, I think it's best for the media to independently verify. And the media is there, all the media outlets are. For the US government, for the British government, everyone is there. They're, checking everything. And for the Ukrainian agencies, because for instance, the other night, missile hit Ukrainian radiation waste center where they have nuclear waste. They collect nuclear waste. It's a storage facility. So they came out, and the nuclear agency, and said, this was hit at this moment. The radiation monitors are down. Our cameras caught a missile coming in, but we can't go until the shelling stops too, independently, with portable monitors, whatever. The minute they did, they immediately updated and said, okay, we have verified there's no risk, no extra radiation leak, and that the missile actually happened to hit a fence not the actual, building. So, I mean, I think right now it's best to use like official sources, government sources, and with the amount of nuclear waste, for instance, in Ukraine, I mean, every agency is monitoring it. Every agency is reporting, updating, not to cause panic. And then obviously through media, they're reporting it or they directly come out and issue a report. I mean, Nick, you would know about this, right?
Yep.
Well,
We swim in the same ocean. Yep. There was one particular story from this, I think it was this weekend, that where there was a trend that somebody asked a question about here about African students being thrown off trains, and that got a lot of play. Do you know anything more about that story and what?
I don't. And again, it does, I can't comment because I don't know. And I do know that Ukrainians, I mean, minus fighting a war, that there are people on the ground, like humanitarian agencies working with Ukrainians to get to the bottom of that. Again, the chaos, that they show, if you see, and it could be part of Russian disinformation, it could have actually happened. But if you see, like my friend today, like I said, went through it, it was such a zoo that he almost lost his children because it's so much shoving and pushing and disorganized, and people, I mean, people have been up for 4 days traveling, trying to get out of this country on top of bombs. You have to sit in a bus parked for 32 kilometers. You don't know if there's going to be a missile falling on your bus, so the stress and the huge influx on the border is so crazy right now that absolutely it's happening to everyone. Was it intentionally happening to them, or could someone have taken a picture and said, oh, look, in order to kind of put this push back against Ukraine and say, oh, look, they're racist. Ukrainians came out right away and said, look, we are going to investigate this on top of everything else. And they are working with humanitarian agencies, both on the Polish side and on the Ukrainian side, and same on the Romanian side and on the Ukrainian side.
And ambassadors from countries like Nigeria and stuff have come out and said, we've heard this. We have not found any credible sources, but we're working with people on the ground. And so a lot of the ambassadors to those African countries have really, so we're looking into it, but they've kind of refuted it as well.
Yeah, because you can take a chaotic scene. I mean, here's a perfect example of how Russia works. And they've worked like this. I mean, like I said, this is there. They have won the information, warfare. Until now, until this week, where Putin put himself on a suicide mission. But they've won the information warfare. And here's two perfect examples. One, during the riots, Portland, there was a video circulating and it showed rioters burning a police officer. And that thing went viral. When I traced it back, it was actually from a Russian subsidiary, like one of their disinformation subsidiaries to RT, which is Russia Today, which is a disinformation outlet. It was there. I traced it back. They were the ones who put it into the sphere. The video, when you reversed it, was actually from Guadalajara, Mexico. So it wasn't even in Portland. It wasn't an American burning the police officer. But the point is, at the quick speed of this video traveling and with protests across the country, and police on the ground hearing like, oh my God, one of our officers just got burned. I mean, this is what they do. They want to incite that chaos because there's not enough time for people to actually go and figure out of what's happening. That video was never, or eventually got removed. It stayed up for quite a while. And then I remember doing a correction and saying, listen, this is Guadalajara, Mexico. This is not America. This is not Portland. And these aren't Americans who are burning a police officer. That video versus what I got, again, like I probably got like 2% of the retweets of that video. And then another time they've done it in war too. I mean, when we were in Syria, they always painted that narrative that we were assisting ISIS, and that's it, you know, like, and that's the disinformation they put out there. The defense ministry one time put a Call of Duty video clip showing that that we are the American military is just giving cover to allow ISIS to move. Thank God for gamers online. They were like, oh, this is Call of Duty. And finally, they tracked the exact point of the video game of the scene that they used. The defense ministry, suddenly their irrefutable evidence disappeared off their website. So, I mean, this is how careful you have to be with disinformation. And they will do it with anything that they can find their hands on. You know, you see riots like where I was, we had a protest, maybe 800 people came, yeah, crazy, screaming that we need to burn, you know, schoolhouses down and whatever over the mask mandate. The whole world saw these protests and they were like, oh my God, what is happening with, you know, where you live? And I'm like, listen, that was about 800 people. Half of them were agitators, Proud Boys and others. I live on a place on an island that's 500,000 people. So, I mean, they take a scene like that and amplify it to the point that you would think that my whole island is like out there screaming to burn schools. And they've done the same in France. They do the same in Germany, Italy. I mean, in Italy, they showed a protest and they're very good at amplifying protests, especially the violent part. Like, you know, could be a Black Lives Matter protest. There's one fight on a street corner. They will make sure that that fight is the thing that will spread, not everyone else thinking. And then it looks like a violent protest. And then they actually put it into their media and show like, oh, look at all the violence happening there. But even like a friend in Italy, same thing. They showed a protest. You would think, my God, what's going on? It was like 30 people who came out. But the way they made it look, you know, you're sitting in New York or wherever you are, you're like, wow, like the whole country came out over these mask mandates. Meanwhile, it's not, you know. So they definitely use, and they love visual. They definitely use, you know, videos, memes, anything to target your emotions, because they want you not to have the critical thinking of, you know what, let me actually sit down and Google this. They want to pull at your emotions. And that's why you see QAnon with children. And, you know, they use those sensitive things where you react instead of just, you know, saying, wait, let me hold on, let me go and verify if this is real, if this is fake.
We had a couple of questions. Is there a way to get information to people in Russia, the accurate information?
That's actually what I'm working on. I know that Khodorkovsky and Navalny and others, the Russian opposition figures, their organizations are working. It is penetrating. People there are seeing it, which I was actually shocked, you know, because I thought it was going to be a problem. I think, you know, I'm actually trying to figure it out myself, and I'll definitely let you know how. I've been trying to tap onto their hashtags, and I just started writing in Russian, which I didn't do my whole Twitter career. But now over this, I just want to try to push the messages out back to Russia. So I've been writing to them in Russian. We'll see. I mean, for now, they are getting the messages. It's getting through. The government is beginning to crack down, because a friend of mine told me today in Moscow, he was standing on one block and he had no service with his VPN. He walked 4 blocks over, he had service with his VPN. So right now they're in the process of really beginning to crack down, because they are extremely, extremely concerned about the amount of videos and scenes coming back from Ukraine going into Russia to show what is actually happening there. Because Russia, in their media, they're painting this as like a little operation, and they went off to Donetsk and just, you know, and that's it. Like, they're not painting that they're bombing the whole country. I mean, so, but people are like, you know, seeing the images, they're like, whoa, this really is. And they're making the phone calls to verify with family inside of Ukraine. They're like, this really is happening, you know? So I'll let you know when I find out the best way.
Thank you. That would be great.
Yeah.
Jamie, do you have another? We've got a lot of questions here.
There's a lot of questions. So,
I
We did
agree,
have somebody ask
Elisa.
about the Kyiv Independent, if they're reputable. I've certainly been following them myself.
I just wanted to comment the last comment. I see Elisa, she's absolutely right, spreading the truth. And that's how you beat disinformation, is by fighting it with information. Same thing with corruption. You beat corruption by exposing corruption and showing, everything. And that's exactly like what, I've been trying to do and people in Russia are doing, or outside of Russia pushing in, like the children, who are crying. Like there was a little girl who filmed a 2-second thing like, Putin, can you please take your troops out of here, from the children of Ukraine, And just like for them, like you take that same emotion, because in Russia, if a mother sees this little girl like asking to remove the troops, and that's the truth. I mean, there are troops there. The little kids are traumatized right now. That's the way to do it. Using the same tactics that they use, we have to reverse engineer and send it back, but with information, not disinformation.
Now, do you have any thoughts on how we can effectively combat the, Republican mantra? And we know that Putin will help, that this was a direct result of Biden's weakness and, the whole Putin didn't act while Trump was in office narrative.
Again, by showing that Russia has a military strategy, this has been part of their strategy. They have been at war for 8 years in Ukraine. I mean, over 14,000 people have died from this war. It's great that people are now paying attention and like, oh my God, look at Ukraine. But for the past 8 years, same thing has, well, not to this extent, but I mean, there's been a bloody war in the country. So that is absolutely false. And I mean, look, people are going to say what they're going to say. I personally, in those cases with those people who are pushing these narratives, especially the pro-Putin narratives, there is some reason for it. And I personally think that it's more important to hold them accountable by having proper investigations, because then they'll shut up. Because like the Bannons and the Michael Flynns, clearly they're not doing it from the bottom of their heart, that they decided to, spew every single, on the Tucker Carlson's, spew every single thing that the Kremlin says, and then they are the mouthpiece. In this case, I mean, we can attempt to fight back, but it's going to do two different spheres, because we're in like an echo chamber where we have our messaging in one area, they have their own messaging. It's very hard to cross penetrate, even though now, strangely enough, it is cross penetrating, because now you have the support. Like I saw Jack Posobiec, well, like I didn't even understand it, but that he suddenly is like, because he's Polish, and he's like, oh, Poland is helping Ukraine, and the Polish people are lining up to give blood to Ukrainians, and like he put a Ukrainian Polish flag. So a lot of it is going to self-correct right now, because I was like, literally before I talked to you, the last time I talked to you, I said, I can't believe Putin took 2 decades of operations and blew it in like 4 days, because that's pretty much what he's done right now. He's kind of realigned, shifted the forces. I saw Sebastian Gorka. I mean, how Putin was he? And the other day in CPAC, he's screaming, kill Russian soldiers. And I was like, who are you? Like, what are you talking about? To a room of CPAC people clapping. It's not like they were like, boo, they were all clapping. Yes, kill Russian soldiers. So we're going to have to watch very carefully, because it's going to be realigning. So we can't use the old methods of monitoring them, because they're kind of taking a weird split, I don't understand it myself, honestly.
Yeah. And one thing we need to reinforce is that, this has actually united the world right now. That has been spectacular to see. You've got a few of the countries, but you have never seen the majority of the world so unified as you do right in this moment.
That's why I said Putin took 2 decades of operations and blew it overnight, because even Orban, a puppet of his, like even today, though, he said he wouldn't allow legal weapons transfer to Ukraine through his airspace, but he's been a puppet of Putin since 2008. helping push the far right nationalist movement across Europe. And he was at the Ukrainian-Hungarian border yesterday saying, I will sign off on every sanction. Ukraine is a sovereign country. No one has a right to attack it, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what? I'm like, okay. So he literally like put the world into a position. You're either the Assads and the, I don't even know who's in Iran now, whoever the president in Iran is. You're either Iran, Syria, Russia, Nicaragua and Venezuela, or you're the rest of the world, and North Korea. So, I mean, he's shifted it to a point that everything else, I mean, you know me for how long? How long have I been screaming, cut the money flow? I mean, I did not think I was going to see this in my lifetime. And I can't even understand that, like all the sanctions, and we always had the tools to stop Putin's operations. And, and same with China and same with Iran. And apparently they pulled every tool out of the toolbox. So, now we're seeing the money flow being cut, and that's also going to disrupt a lot of disinformation campaigns inside of the United States. So it'll be interesting to see what Russia does, how they realign. They have a few months. They definitely are going to want to target our elections just because, I mean, like everything that's going back to them, even economically, like they didn't open their stock market today. They're not opening it tomorrow. They're scared to open it. They don't know what free fall it'll go into. So, I mean, there's a lot of payback that's coming our way, and it will go towards our elections, towards cyber attacks, and, potentially other things. But we just have to monitor and see how it falls and see how these new alignments happen and what gets disrupted, what new forms out of it, and whatnot.
I was going to say, Olga, I found something fascinating that how that Ukraine has recruited basically cyber allies across the world to do cyber attacks on Russia cyber infrastructure. And I think they're getting a little bit of their medicine back. They're used to hacking and doing all that to other people. And I'm not sure they're used to other people doing it back to them. So that's been quite interesting to watch.
And also, I mean, a lot of people I have to remember that both security services came from the same place, the same origin. So, I mean, it's literally watching two security services that use very similar tactics battling each other, except one is a 70-year-old man in a bunker, and the other one is a comedian president who is now grabbing the world's attention and knows social media and is savvy and knows how to deliver a message. But they're really battling back and forth with the same exact, tactics, except that Russia clearly has 2 times more, military power, well, more than 2 times military power. But in the hybrid space, they're using the same tactics. So, I mean, it's fascinating to watch. Ukraine is definitely getting the truth out, which is great because, for too long, they've been painted as like, oh, they're not worth it. I mean, they shouldn't join EU. They shouldn't join anything. It's just, some corrupt country that's a previous Soviet country. And, and now people are really beginning to realize that this is a sovereign country. And even reporters are landing there. They're like, what? You have Starbucks and McDonald's here? I mean, yes, it's a modern city inside of Europe. You have everything there.
I think just the sheer fight that the Ukrainian people have for democracy.
Oh. And their land.
Yeah, it's their land. And to me, I mean, we're seeing this all over the world, this move away from democracy. We're seeing it in our own country. To me, it's like these people are not only fighting for themselves, they're fighting for democratic freedoms for people all over the world.
Yep, absolutely. And when I met you, I told you remember I said if it was in Ukraine, Trump came in, he would have been dragged out of the office in 2 months. Ukrainians they've already thrown out 2 presidents. They would have gathered together and said, no, you cross the line, out you go. And that's it, because they have that fight. They've been fighting forever. I mean, this goes back to a century of when Stalin starved them, and killed probably 7, 8 million, maybe 10 million Ukrainians. And since then, they've always been in a fight. So, I mean, it's something they have in them. They fight for not themselves, not today. They fight for their grandchildren's future. Like, they're not even fighting for their children's future. They're like, even if I don't ever see the results, at least I know I'm going to leave this planet doing what I can to move the country in the right direction. And you see now, I mean, 73-year-old grandpa, and he's like, where's the gun? Let's go.
Yeah.
Wasn't it Ukraine
inspiring.
that turned over the documents on Manafort when they raided that palace? Am I
Yep.
remembering that correctly?
Yep. Yeah, and they assisted. I mean, they've been a great ally, and it's so sad because, we've had so much, like, they should have been more properly, like, prepared as far as weapons over the past 8 years, but they've been a great ally. They, like I said, they were a testing ground for every single thing you see in the West. Everything from cyber attacks to power grids to infrastructure attacks, to everything you could think of, division, disinformation, you name it, whatever Europe and US is seeing, it was tested and tested over and over and over there. I mean, there they even attempted to poison the president, who had won a legitimate election and that. So they've tested everything there, and they've been a very helpful partner, because even during 2016, the disinformation was that, I don't even understand, but somehow the DNC server went to Ukraine, and I didn't even understand what the conspiracy was. I don't even think they understood what they were putting. But Ukrainian intelligence worked with our FBI, and they were absolutely more than happy to show all the tactics being used with election interference, with, taking down the power grid, taking down the water facility. Well, they thwarted a water facility poisoning. What else? The financial systems were taken down. Same thing with Estonia. Estonia suffered one of the biggest cyber attacks, in history. And all the Eastern European countries were like begging, like the bigger countries, like, hi, listen to us. We're dealing with this. We could help you. And that's it. And you see Estonia too. Estonia, if you want to learn how to fight disinformation, look at Estonia's charter. I mean, they have put in a whole disinformation center that is part of every citizen's schooling. And that's it. And you have to go through this digital, I guess, warfare thing to understand what disinformation is, how to fight it. And they don't have these issues because they are very on top of it. They train their citizens to understand what disinformation is, how to recognize it, and how to combat it.
Something to aspire to. We've got a lot of work to do here.
Well, Britain opened the Disinformation Center this week. They announced they're opening a Disinformation Center. I'm like, oh, finally.
Good timing.
I know Media Matters has been tracking a lot of this as well. They've tracked a little bit more on Facebook, but it's still good information to have.
And just an update, our hashtag, which we're going to be fighting disinformation, specifically, Russian, but also homegrown disinformation here at home. Democracy, not autocracy. So we launched that today, and we have about 30 million impressions already. So
nice.
Well, I think that might be a good time for a pep talk.
Yeah, let's add David in here. So everybody, this is our good friend David Yankovic, who's a senior advisor to DemCast, good friend of us all, and he wanted to come on. He helped us sort of define this disinformation specific project and is helping us launch it. We really appreciate his thoughts and guidance on that. So David, you wanted to come on and talk to folks.
Yeah, guys, first, everybody here, thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't pretty myself up more for you. I know I'm wearing a hoodie and the hat. Usually I try to do a little bit better, but we've all been busy. I mean, there's a couple of things that I've been thinking about through this. I mean, first off, what we're doing is working. The world's seeing it. You know, members of the UN, you know, members of parliament in other countries, you know, they're sharing what we're sending out. They're responding, they're retweeting. Even some of them are getting into the comments of what we're doing. This amplification is critical, obviously, and exactly what Olga said. I mean, I don't agree, or I don't disagree with one word that she said. This is absolutely critical. I see I lost audio. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. One thing I want to say, you know, every study I've seen over the last 17 years, and I've been doing a lot of research on this and trying to advocate to Congress and members of leadership, have shown that volume matters and sentiment comes in second. So, for example, in this, for the first time ever, you know, Russia is getting completely overwhelmed on social media through volume and on sentiment, but especially volume. It's been negative for them. They can't continue to use propaganda and, you know, disinformation the same way that they have before. And on our side of it, on the domestic side, you know, this also gives us the ability to be able to reach, you know, voters that we haven't been able to reach before. I'm sure you guys are all seeing, you know, deplorables and, you know, that kind of, you know, those types of names showing up in your comments and asking for information for the first time. And I'm in Ohio right now, wearing my Ohio State shirt. And they're, you know, a lot of the Trump supporters up here are also having, you know, some of these really direct conversations with me. And, you know, as I've been talking to, you know, different members and looking at polling and things like that, for the first time, we have a chance to actually get our word out. You know, what we're doing is important, but we have the chance to get our word out to Republicans. You know, they're finally starting to wake up a little bit and see kind of what's happening. And like, you know, you guys have talked about a little bit on here, you know, with, you know, their ties to Russia and the historic things that they've done. You know, that's important stuff. And we definitely need to get information out about that during the elections. But right now, the biggest thing that we can be doing is really amplifying what Biden's done. You know, showing that he's given us the real-time intel, and that real-time intel has enabled us to be able to get the word out for the administration about what's really going on. You know, he's been behind the scenes, he's been building alliances, you know, basically strengthening NATO, the UN, the European Union, all of this stuff has been, you know, behind the scenes, but he's been vocally saying what's going to happen for months and months. You know, getting that out there has really been helpful, and people need to see it because the polling numbers are, you know, he's having a little bit of trouble getting that message out because us Democrats, we're not as good at this as the other side is sometimes. You know, one thing too that, you know, fighting against propaganda, you know, and especially what's happened in this country domestically, it's been very similar to what you see in cults. You know, and we talked about that a lot. You know, when someone's in a cult, you can't just go and attack them and tell them they're a bunch of morons, especially when they're kind of waking up a little bit and they're saying like, wow, like this, you know, Putin's really bad. You know, and some of these people are the same people who have been cheering for, you know, this for years and years and years that are now being horrified. And I know this is contrary to a lot of the popular opinion. We all want to go out there and rub everybody's face in it, but this isn't about Biden or Donald Trump or Obama or, you know, any other president. And this is about democracy versus tyranny. It's about America versus tyranny. And that messaging really resonates. And that's our way of bringing people into our conversations with us and having these conversations and letting them on their own start waking up to, you know, what's been really going on without us having to slam them for it and put it in their face. Because the second that we do, it puts everybody in their corners. And I can tell you this from every political race I've ever been on. You know, it's, you know, the second that we start slamming your candidate or your favorite person or whatever without, you know, saying, you know, having a nice conversation or whatever, you know, about it, you know, everybody goes in their own sides. You know, and that's really critical. And I'm not saying that we should be kumbaya with, you know, freaking neo-Nazis or, you know, propagandists or trolls out there or anything like that. But we should, now we have the volume to be able to push back against the trolls and push back against the neo-Nazis and the stuff that we're seeing on social media, the disinformation and propaganda. I've never felt better in my entire career and what we've been doing and being able to accomplish than I have for the Ukrainian citizens of the, you know, in the last 72 hours. You know, billions of impressions have been generated. we've been able to amplify causes, where to get help, where to donate to, the humanitarian, places that are doing the most impact. And like Olga said, and like you guys have, documenting war crimes. And that is critical. The UN is seeing this, leadership is seeing this, and they're using this. The volume is more important than the sentiment is. It's getting this out there, sharing these videos, amplifying each other, and really, pushing the narrative of what's really going on here. And again, this isn't Biden versus Trump. Donald Trump wants this attention. The more volume he gets, the more attention he gets, the more news articles are written about him. And we don't want Donald Trump to have anything said here. He doesn't belong here in the first place. And I'm not saying this as a political piece. He's not president of the United States anymore. And while he's doing all he can to divide and do there, we have to be able to really amplify the truth of what's happening and be able to speak to what's going on. We definitely need our own Fox News. I've been trying to say this. We definitely need our own piece of this. But the other thing is too, guys, there's a lot of Russian propaganda sites like Redfish Stream, obviously Fox, there's RT in the United States, that's out there. The European Union has pushed that back and is making efforts to curtail what's going on. We also need to be doing that here in the United States and pushing back against the disinformation that's going on social media and going on the TV. You guys are the tip of the sword, the tip of the spear. And this is the most critical moment that we've ever had for social media organizing, to be able to show the world how important this work is and how much we can actually get done. Currently, right now, leadership and a lot of people in politics here, and I'm sure there's a lot of you guys on the phone, the popular opinion is that social media doesn't drive elections. It doesn't impact polling. It doesn't have any effect on anything except for donations and volunteers sometimes. They don't see this as important. I think that now the world is waking up when they're calling what's happening the TikTok war, and when we're seeing social media driving what's going on. You guys are really saving the people of Ukraine right now by amplifying them. And I just wanted to get on and tell you, this is the most important thing that I've been a part of. And I'm really glad to see that there's so many other people out there who are taking this on. We can't be there with them. We can't be shoulder to shoulder with them out there. Obviously, the United States can't directly get into this because that starts World War III. You have to exhaust every diplomatic option that you possibly can before you make a military action. And that's what Biden's trying to do by coordinating the world, walking Putin into this, misery that he's in right now and doing it. So what we're doing is critical. Everybody just thank you so much, but keep going. And even if this conflict ends up, slowing down or doing whatever, we need this all over. We need this for candidates throughout the country. We need this against disinformation, what's going on. This cannot stop. Where we're at right now, we have to keep fighting with this. We're there. So everybody, thank you so much. And thanks for having me, DemCast. And Olga, keep up the good work. You've been, I've been with you for 5-6 years now. I think we all have, thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Thanks, David. We always like to have David come on and get everybody pumped up.
I'm not as good as Doug Jones is when he does this, but taking everybody to church, but I try to channel him a little bit.
Yeah, do a good job. We are at the hour. I want to be mindful of everybody's time here. So I think we will go ahead and close the conversation down. This is just the first conversation about this that we've had, and we're going to keep them going. We're building a whole team around this. We will continue to provide advice and resources. We'll keep in contact with folks like Olga who are digging deep on this stuff so that we can relay all the most important stuff to you as amplifiers. And so just a reminder, if you haven't joined the team yet, for the disinformation team, go to demcast.com. There's a menu item for this team. Please go ahead and actually join that so that we can get you logged into our volunteer database with the right codes and stuff, so that we send you the right emails and send you the right texts and all that kind of thing. It's helpful. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It is important, like David said, and we just got to keep it going. And it's best to think about this as a marathon, not a sprint.
And don't forget State of the Union tomorrow.
And so, yeah, State of the Union tomorrow. Yeah, there's a few things going on, SCOTUS nomination, and holy moly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't forget about SCOTUS, and we have the first Black female Supreme Court nominee ever. So we're obviously not we're focused on other things, but that's also pretty badass too.
Yeah,
We have a
I'm
toolkit for
like
that
stuck in
too.
America. I mean, I've been outside of here. I need to come back to America mentally because I've been so focused. I completely forgot about the State of the Union. Also, one quick suggestion. First, thank you so much for having me on. This is amazing. Also, maybe a Spaces, Twitter Spaces, so a lot of people can like even not scrolling. Because I think it's such a useful conversation, just even to correct narratives. I love Spaces.
If we hosted that one there, maybe next week, would you join us? Awesome.
I love Spaces because it's like one of those things that people don't have to commit. If they are scrolling, they're like, "Oh, who's talking?"
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll plan to do something next week then. Thank you.
And Olga does best at 2 a.m. So.
Although I have not slept, and since this war started, I think I slept like 9 hours total between the past 6 days.
Well, thank you for the important work that you do.
Thank you for covering, and thank you for being involved.
Thank you, Olga.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye guys.
See you soon.